Tonight, Keir Starmer sits down with me as part of our Leaders interview series and tells me an element of the backlash to his plans to bring in VAT on private schools has been driven by Westminster and the media. The Labour leader claims there is no evidence that schools will have to close and that they don't have to pass the cost on to parents. Also tonight, police reveal they're set to interview MP candidates over the election betting scandal. As Sky News understands that Rishi Sunak's most senior advisor has been interviewed by senior officials at the Gambling Commission. We hoist Sky's parliamentary bench up Arthur's Seat to get a bird's-eye view of how the election is shaping up in Scotland. And we see them all the time on our TVs, but what are the party leaders watching on theirs? And with us for the reaction over the next hour are Salma Shah, Patrick Diamond and Sky's election commentator Adam Boulton, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. 1 week today, Britain will be voting for the party they want to form the next government, and also for the person that they want to be our next Prime Minister. Now, it's almost certain to be this man, Sir Keir Starmer, currently leader of the Labour Party, by the end of next week, very probably Britain's Prime Minister. So today I sat down with him at a pottery factory in Stoke, where he stamped clay pots with his Change logo, and he talked to me about everything from the NHS to climate change, private schools to the England Euros team. Now, I'll let you in on how I approached this interview, because I did want to approach it a little bit differently. I didn't want it to be the same as any other interview that he's done on the campaign trail, but instead to really see it as almost his first interview as Prime Minister-elect. Because if he wins the key to number 10 in just a few weeks' time, or a week's time, I should say, what should we expect from a Keir Starmer government? Have a listen. Believe the polls, and this man will be Prime Minister within days. Sir Keir Starmer, the former top barrister on the slow march back from catastrophe under Corbyn. Now, with a reputation as a political chameleon, his Labour leadership dogged by a series of major U-turns. Perhaps fitting, then, that his manifesto bears one word: change. At its core, promises of economic stability, limited new spending, and turning the page, a phrase used no less than 24 times. But faced with the most challenging in-tray since the war, has Sir Keir really got what it takes? Would change under Labour go far enough, fast enough? And ultimately, can he be trusted? Fresh off the Labour battle bus, Sir Keir joined us at a pottery factory in Stoke-on-Trent for a campaign stop. So Rishi Sunak keeps going with Haribo. What's your energy choice?
Coffee. Coffee and then some more coffee. I'm not a big one for snacks, but coffee, but coupled with cheese sandwiches and tuna sandwiches in the back of that Labour bus.
Are you enjoying it still?
It's the high life, isn't it?
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, no, look, we've been 4.5 years been working for this. I woke up with a smile on my face on the 1st of January because I knew we'd have an election this year. We're really pleased to be able to take this argument to the country. We're ready for this. We've got a positive offer to put before the country. So we're campaigning with a smile and a spring in our step.
You've got a bit of pottery skills now as well. You done any pottery before?
Only at school.
Oh, yeah.
But it was brilliant to see that and to just see the brilliant skill of making something. And, you know,
yeah.
it is really incredible. And making things is so important, and we're really good at it in this country.
It's quite impressive, actually, to see it here, isn't it? Definitely.
It's great. Yeah. And the enthusiasm. No pressure. No one's watching.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. In exactly a week's time, Britain is going to be voting for their next Prime Minister. It's almost certain that you will win the election and you'll be in number 10. And I do have to say, you know, they always say, don't they, that you're never as powerful as when you first enter office. I'm thinking about Tony Blair saying he wishes he'd been bolder quicker. So if you win, what will your first priority be?
Well, the first thing is the caveat. We've got a week to go, and every vote matters, every vote has to be earned. And in individual constituencies, there'll be very, very close results, and therefore I don't want to get ahead of myself, and be complacent about this. And I do remind everybody that change only happens if you vote for it. And it is important that we keep making that argument into the election. But of course, I want to ensure that if we are elected in to serve our country, that we are ready from the get-go, that we can hit the ground running, because many people will feel that the country has been left broken with not anything really working properly under this government. And our job will be to come in to fix that, put the country back on its feet, and to rebuild. And we're very ambitious about that in terms of the change we want to see with the NHS, with skills and opportunities. But it has to start with the first steps. What are you going to be doing?
So what is that then? What's the first priority?
The first steps are going to be putting in place the plans for 40,000 extra appointments in the NHS to get the waiting list down each and every week. That's 2 million a year. Making sure that we start the recruitment of the teachers we need in our secondary schools, so all children have the opportunities that they need to go as far as their talents will take them, not be inhibited by the income or salary of their parents. Making sure that we're setting up Great British Energy so that we can deal with energy, renewables, and keep the energy costs down. Here in Stoke, the single thing every business has said to me is our energy bills are too high. These are some of the things that we can begin to do, the first steps, the down payment on the bigger change we need across the country.
You talk there about first steps. And look, I know you don't want to be complacent, and I get that, I totally get that. But at the same time, the polls suggest you're about to be gifted a historic majority, the kind of majority that you get once in a generation, even once in a century. The kind of majority you can be radical with. If you look at Clement Attlee, when he won a historic majority in 1945, he created the NHS. When Stanley Baldwin did the same in 1924, he gave women the vote. What's Keir Starmer going to do? It sounds like these are just quite small first steps. Are you going to waste the opportunity?
Well, firstly, I'm not going to get ahead of myself and predict what's actually going to happen in the general election, because every vote does have to be
But I'm asking what you would do if you were Prime Minister, because you could do a lot.
Yeah, the first steps are a down payment. They're not all that we want to do, but until we get the waiting list down, frankly, we're going to struggle with the change that we need, because we can't get our economy going. We need to stabilise our economy.
But you might not be as powerful as when you first get into office. That's kind of my point.
But those first steps are really important, because I think people are asking us two questions. Do you understand the problems I'm facing, and have you got a first step to deal with it? So I actually know I'm going to get my operation, because if you can't get that fixed, I'm not going to have confidence in you making sure the NHS is fit for the future. But it's a first step to an NHS which is fit for the next 75, 76 years. That means changing the very model of the NHS and reforming the NHS to move it to a preventative model, to make much greater use of AI, to make sure that it's much more community-based. These are big changes that we've got in place for the NHS, because you talk about the great projects of last Labour governments. Creating the NHS is one we celebrate every year. I want to make sure that in 50, 60, 70 years, people are celebrating the fact that an incoming Labour government in 2024 made sure the NHS was not something we look proudly back on, but actually built fit for the future. I
guess this is because to take the NHS for an example, you say the NHS isn't on its knees but on its face, but what you're proposing is just a 1.1% increase in spending, and it's not just the NHS. Climate, for example, would be another example. You say you want a zero carbon electricity system by 2030, but you're now saying you're going to spend 6 times less than you did in 21 making that happen. It feels pretty timid, I've got to say.
Well, the first thing is that if you're on a waiting list and you need your hip replaced or your knee replaced or whatever it may be, saying you're going to get your operation isn't timid, it's vital.
I'm saying that 1.1% increase in spending is timid.
So this is change worth having. The bigger change for the NHS on AI, on tech, is really important part of the future of the NHS. As is GB Energy, a publicly owned energy company which we will set up. It'll be based in Scotland. That will rush towards a 2030 clean power target, which will ensure that we get energy security, lower energy bills, and the next generation of jobs. These are big changes. Countries don't go through sort of energy transitions that frequently. This is a big moment for our country.
You said you were going to spend £28 billion on that, and now you've reduced it to £4.7 billion a year, 6 times less. It feels like you've started radical and you've become more and more timid.
No, the objective has always been clean power by 2030. And I've not moved that.
If you don't get it, well, you've failed.
I have checked that every single thing we need to get to 2030 is in place, fully costed and fully funded. We do need investors to come up alongside us on this project. We've been talking to them now for the best part of 2 years. about the conditions they need to come up and partner with us on this. And most of them say it's going to be difficult, but it's doable. And that's the sort of challenge I like. Difficult, but doable. And what a massive change it will make. Because when we went from, into coal and then from coal to oil and gas, these were big moments in our country's history. We're about to go through the next transition to renewables. If we get this right, we can be a world leader on the next generation of jobs and have jobs which are measured not just in years, but decades.
It feels sometimes like, I think many people would agree there are big issues facing the country. You're good at diagnosing the problems. You say that there's a climate emergency, but you scale back the green plans. You say the army's been hollowed out, but then you won't commit to increasing it. You say child poverty levels are intolerable, but you want to keep the 2-child limit on benefits.
Well, let me just push back on that a little, if you don't mind, because, look, the biggest problem, I'll diagnose the problem, because we've heard it again this afternoon, which is energy bills are so high that some of the businesses in Stoke are going bust. Now, I hear that across the whole of the country. The cost of living crisis, energy bills. So how are we going to address that? We're going to set up GB Energy. We're going to go for clean power by 2030. It is difficult to do. That carries with it much lower bills, not for a year or two, but actually for decades to come. That is big change, desperately needed. That's not diagnosis. That is diagnosis followed by what actually needs to change in order to deliver it. And that's the sort of long-term thinking that we haven't had over the last 14 years, fixing the fundamentals so we can move forward as a country. One
of the parts of your manifesto that I find quite interesting that I haven't spoken to you about before is your commitment to put VAT on private schools. It feels like that's a row, you're quite happy to have. And if I'm honest with you, I'm a bit confused by some of the arguments against this, right? Saying that private schools will close, for example, if it's introduced. Why wouldn't private schools just increase class sizes or cut staff and make, I guess, the kind of economic decisions that the state sector has to make all the time? Do you think that actually, private schools should have to make the kind of, cut their cloth in the same way that all the other schools do? Yes, I think they will adapt, and they've had lots of increases in costs over the last 10, 14 years. And they've accommodated it, and there's no evidence to show that these schools will close. They don't have to pass the cost on to parents, but it is a tough choice. It's a difficult choice. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is ideological or easy, because I do understand that many parents work hard and save hard to send their children to private school, because they've got aspiration for their child. But every single parent has aspiration for their child, including every parent of a child in a state secondary school. And at the moment, we don't even have teachers in core subjects in secondary schools, state secondary schools, in subjects like maths. So we've got PE teachers and supply teachers teaching maths to young people in our state secondaries. That's not on because it's going to hold them back. And one of the things I made absolutely clear is I'm determined to stop the over-reliance we have, where too many children, their future is determined by the income and salary of their parents rather than their talent. I'm absolutely got that in my sights as something we are going to change with an incoming Labour government. It's quite a popular policy, polls quite well. Do you think that some of the backlash against it has been because there's so many people in Westminster and the media who either went to private school or send their children there? I think there's an element of that, but parents across the country do say to me, if they've got children in private school, that they're concerned about it, and I go through the reason why we're doing it with them, explain to them that schools don't have to pass it on to them. So I'm not. So you think it would be? It's not a bad thing if private schools have to make economies. It's a difficult choice, but they're businesses in the end, and they're very successful in the round. Actually, under this government, 1,000 private schools have closed because their business didn't work. Now, I want them to thrive, but we need to make this difficult choice because, in the end, if I want the teachers we need in our state secondary schools, I have to answer the question which you would put to me, which is, how are you going to pay for that? You're going to pay for that by getting rid of the tax breaks for private schools and use it to invest in the teachers we need in our state secondaries. I'm quite interested in, I guess, your own kind of experiences of this, because your school went private when you were there. You didn't pay, of course, but it did go private when you were there. How did you sort of feel about it at the time? Did you agree with the decision? I had nothing to do with it. No, but how did you feel about it? I don't think I even appreciated it. And if you ask all the people that were at school with me, we started off as state grammar boys, paid for by the local authority, and we ended up as state grammar schools, paid for by the local authority. But the school must have changed a bit, though, when you were there, though. No. I guess I'm just wondering, your mother was obviously very ill growing up. You've spoken about not being able to afford to fix windows in your home, you must have noticed the privilege around you.
I didn't notice, but the reason for that is that you had the whole school, the whole cohort were state grammar school boys, and all of them were supported through. So everybody in the school the day before the change was exactly the same as everybody after the change, and the funding was still from the local authority. So that didn't materially change. It's obviously very different now. But it is very important to me that every child has those opportunities. Yeah, I mean, look, we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. We couldn't make ends meet on a number of occasions. Not pleading great poverty, but I do know what it means to feel or fear the next bill coming through through the letterbox. And a lot of people are going through that at the moment in this cost of living crisis. And politics is about, as you rightly say, our policies, our ambition. It is also about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make your decisions? And I have in my mind's eye all the people that want to get on for themselves, their families, their communities, and ultimately their country, because I think that's the vast majority of people in this country who are reasonably minded, pretty tolerant, want to pull the country together and move it forward.
We are out of time, but just finally, what's more likely, you winning the election or England winning the Euros?
Well, I can't have both, I don't suppose.
No. Absolutely not.
The more important one is winning the election, but don't let that be any sort of reflection on... I say get behind the team when it comes to England. We've got really good players.
You were pictured wearing a white shirt watching England. What happened to your England shirt? Was it in the wash?
I'd been on the road all day with the campaign, and so...
You found it now that Scotland had been knocked out?
Well, I did watch the Scotland game as well.
OK. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the programme today. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
My interview there with Sir Keir Starmer. Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is here. We can chat a bit about what we heard from Keir Starmer. I guess my kind of central premise was like, look, we are almost certainly going to see Keir Starmer winning the election in a week's time, potentially getting a big majority. What is his ambition? And I wanted to get a bit of a sense about the scale of his ambition or not. I don't know what your kind of reflections were on it.
Well, with, a week to go until the election and... I mean, let's be honest, the result's slightly feeling like a foregone conclusion, whatever the size of the majority that we come out with next Friday morning. It is important to listen to interviews like that are one or two steps away from the Daily News to get a feel of the man who will be the most important person in our politics in a matter of days. Because I'll be honest, Sophie, I don't have a complete feel for how he's going to work when, as he probably will do, get to number 10. And in that interview, I felt that you landed on absolutely the central paradox of the campaign that he has been running, which is, when you look at that manifesto, the quite chunky manifesto that Labour's put out, there is incredibly high level of ambition, actually. You flick through and they're going to reclaim the streets and they're going to overhaul public services. The rhetoric couldn't be bigger, but the first steps that take you to the missions are small, and that's what you highlighted. And I think what we're going to discover after next Friday is that we don't know what the second and the third and the fourth step is going to be. And that really came through.
And also, it's easy to say, look, these are the first steps to the great, as you say, kind of big missions that we can achieve in a few years or even a second term. But, often with Prime Ministers, they're at their most powerful right at the beginning, when particularly if they've just won a big majority. That's the lesson from Tony Blair and also from others as well. So I guess I was just trying to unpick that a little bit. And yet I think what came through very clearly is that, yeah, he is going to start with small steps. It was a slightly timid. What did you make about the private school part of the interview as well?
That's right. There's a resistance to painting a bigger picture in any detail, and that's what's going on in the talks behind the scenes with the civil service, by the way. So I think that they're quite patchy as well. Two things were quite striking. I mean, there is no doubt that there is a huge resistance to the private school policy that Keir Starmer's about to push through. I mean, it's been screaming at him from the front pages of quite a lot of newspapers. I was struck both that he acknowledged it, but also he acknowledged it in a very sort of cautious and limited way. This is one of the biggest fights that he's having, but he doesn't want to advertise it that much as a fight. He's trying to take the heat out of it. But do you know what question and answer that really got me was when you asked, I'd never heard him ask this before, and I think that's the point. You asked him what it was like being in a state school that became private. And he came off the rails in the sense that it was a question he hadn't been asked for. He didn't really have a solid answer. He basically said, I don't really know. He doesn't think on his feet that quickly, I have to say.
And it is interesting with it. I was with the private school argument, I was keen to approach it from a different angle, because otherwise, you know what it's like, particularly when you interview someone like Keir Starmer, they have rehearsed lines, the expected questions, and I think it's quite important, particularly at this stage in the campaign, to try and, I guess, ask something slightly unexpected or in a different kind of way as well.
And it revealed that he thinks that private schools should cut their cloth accordingly. Let's see whether they do, or just pass on the fees to parents.
Yeah, and their businesses. Thank you very much indeed, Sam Coates. Right, let's bring in our panel for this evening, shall we? We've got a stellar lineup for you this evening. We have the former Special Advisor to Sajid Javid at the Home Office, Salma Shah, the Professor of Public Policy at Queen Mary University, former Labour Advisor Patrick Diamond, first time on the programme, welcome. And also Sky News' election commentator, Adam Boulton. Great to have you all here. Adam, to you first, because I was trying to, I guess, get a bit of a sense of history when it came to the possibility of a Keir Starmer premiership. You're, of course, somebody who has seen many governments come and go. What's your sense on what we could expect from Keir Starmer in number 10?
I think you got the slogan for the incoming Starmer government, if indeed it does come in, difficult but doable.
Yeah, difficult but doable, yeah.
I mean, it was a very interesting interview from that point of view. And, he was not over-promising in any area, but making it clear that he had his priorities and he's already set down his first steps. So, I think people are going to have to get used to this. It's going to be someone who sticks to his course. And as Sam says, he's not someone who thinks on his feet or changes his mind very quickly. He's going to be quite deliberate in his approach. And, there is definitely different, I think, from New Labour, a kind of classist element to all of this. I mean, even the venue for the interview, sort of gritty pottery factory, they want to get that message out that they're on the side of what they call working people, and that does exclude, frankly, I suspect, most people who've been to private school.
Yeah, I think it was quite revealing. I felt that section of the interview, because I do think you got a couple of hints of the ideology coming through. I don't know what you thought, Patrick.
Well, there is definitely more of a traditional ideology about Keir Starmer. I think lots of comparisons are made with Tony Blair because that's the pivot point that everybody always gravitates towards. But Keir Starmer is a different politician with a different background. And I think he is more assertive about traditional Labour ideology. And you see that in education. He's more comfortable making the argument that there has to be fairness in the system. You have to challenge private sector privilege in a way that perhaps previous Labour governments haven't been willing to do. So I think that does mark him out as different to his predecessors.
Do you think that there's something in the fact that you're most powerful when you first enter power?
I do, and as you rightly pointed out in the interview, that is something which Tony Blair lamented, which is that he felt he didn't use his initial period in office to be as radical and bold in reforming the public services as he wanted to be. Because you are, at the beginning of office, obviously much more powerful. You have the goodwill of the public. You probably have an opposition which is in a state of disarray to some extent.
Sorry, Salma.
Tends to happen when parties go through severe election defeat. So it is absolutely the case that you have an opportunity to be really bold in the way that perhaps you don't later on. And I think it's a good question to ask, how bold will Keir Starmer be prepared to be, given that I think he sees his position as he's doing well because he's assembled a broad coalition. At what point are you prepared to sacrifice some of that coalition in order to be more radical?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I get the sense he's quite a cautious guy, but then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll see something different once he's carried the Ming bars across the election hurdle. What was your take, Salma, and what we could expect from Keir Starmer?
I think what's interesting about this is that everything in the Labour branding has changed. The manifesto has changed. All the signs that you see around him have changed. And yet he doesn't feel like he's going to change all that much. So as Sam said, the rhetoric is there, but nothing underneath it in terms of a specific policy really exists that says this is going to be radical. I think on your point, and that pivot point back to Tony Blair, I think it's interesting. He's going to potentially be gifted this huge majority, potentially even bigger than Thatcher's or Blair's, and he's not really setting the agenda in the same way that they did. They came in with ideas where they were going to have big functional systems changes. He has not got that agenda. There isn't this big radical Starmerism that exists. And I think the problem with that is, if you don't start with that momentum, which Blair did, which Thatcher did, you lose that and it drains away from you very quickly. So it's not just the fact that he's being timid, it's the fact that the big idea isn't there right from the get-go.
I'm not so sure. We do have to remember that although Tony Blair now has said at times that he didn't do enough and he wasted his big majority, his big landslide. He's also said that he could do things that you couldn't do at any other time, that it was liberating, and it was also liberating to come into government for the first time. And remember that some of the big things which New Labour did, most famously independence for the Bank of England, moving around, Tony Blair actually writes about moving around question time, stopping it being twice a week, making it once a week, half an hour, were not discussed during the election campaign. They weren't proposals which were then there. And so I think I still feel, probably in the economic sphere, there is a big idea which we're all missing. And you know, and it may well be moving towards some kind of significant changes in the taxation system.
A big idea that we're missing because they're not telling us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because no one has quite put their finger on it. Well, you know, Gordon Brown, I don't think, shared with the wider team the idea of Bank of England independence, for example.
Patrick, you were there during the Blair years. Do you think Adam's right?
I think one point about Keir Starmer that's missed sometimes, though, is that he is, in some respects, quite well prepared to be in government. One of the points that was always made about Tony Blair was that he'd never run anything in his life. He'd been a barrister and then a politician. You're not running organisations. Well, OK, he ran his rock band at Oxford. It's not quite the same as running the NHS.
Similarities.
But the point is that he has that experience of running big organisations, managing teams, and I think he will feel, in some respects, quite comfortable about coming into government and running the large organisation. On the economic side, I think there is a big idea that Labour's developing. I think one of the issues about industrial policy is it doesn't come alive until you're in government, because that's the point when you start making the investments and making a difference. So I think we'll see in retrospect. And the Thatcher comparison, again, is always made. But, of course, Margaret Thatcher was regarded as quite timid in 1979. It was only after the 1983 landslide that the radicalism really became apparent.
Interesting stuff. Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks, Sam, as well. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we'll take a look at what our party leaders say they're watching on TV and ask what message their choices send to voters. Plus, we'll have the latest stop in our Bench Across Britain series, this time taking views from the top of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh. But next, we're going to have a check-in on the party campaign trails today. They've all been in pottery places, interestingly. Sky News is getting ready to move in for the election.
Hiya. All right, mate. Out you go.
Sorry?
Come on, let's go.
Is this a prank? Is that Beadle's about or something?
Yeah, Kay's about. Ed's already measuring up the screen.
Well, this is fantastic. We're going to have maps there, charts there, more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in.
Then you can both...
We're gone as well?
Gone.
Oh, God.
I'm not joking. We've not got all night.
Yeah, I reckon we can work with this.
This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
Breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Well, just a week left of campaigning. Me and Sam Coates both jetting around the country, both at pottery factories, interestingly, today. Let's have a look at where the parties were out and about. Yeah, lots of dust. This little blue dot here is where Rishi Sunak was. He was in Derbyshire launching the Conservative Party's plan for business. Sam, you were there, weren't you?
That's right. We did actually see Rishi Sunak there. You're going to see a little bit of that chat in a moment. Didn't entirely go well. OK, interesting. Very interesting. Let's have a look at the next one. We were also, of course, with Keir Starmer, where we met up with him in Stoke. He also gave pottery making a go. Before that, he was out and about in Nottingham, of course, where they had that debate. Now, the Lib Dems, Ed Davey, is on the map too. He was in Hazel Grove in Stockport, where he also did a bit of ceramic painting. I've got no idea what's going on with all these pottery visits. He also was in Shropshire and Oxfordshire to try and promote their health budget plans. And Reform UK's leader, Nigel Farage, held a rally in County Durham. Well, Sam, you were out with Rishi Sunak. That's right. The Prime Minister trying to capitalise on last night's debate, where he thought he did well in Nottingham, short distance to Derbyshire. But the question is, has the gambling scandal again overshadowed his campaign? Let's have a listen to Sam's report now.
Rishi Sunak is trying to craft something that will last. It is a delicate art, but has he got the knack?
It was perfect, apart from...
Oh no! Oh no, there's a big... How did that happen?
It should be a stall.
Another dent in his fragile campaign. The news that multiple Tory candidates may now face police investigation over bets on the date of the election. And his own Chief of Staff, Liam Booth-Smith, interviewed as a witness, not a suspect, by the Gambling Commission.
This is a choice about...
Facing a Q&A session with factory workers. Early in the campaign, these events were gentle, deferential even, but not anymore.
Prime Minister, what I'd like to know is why you feel that we should vote for another 4 years of Tory government. Things are infinitely worse than they were in 2010.
Look, there's lots of frustrations that you and others will have about some things in the past. This election is about the future.
But he is struggling to escape the past, now refusing to explain what he told his top parliamentary aide, Craig Williams, before he placed a bet on the date of the election.
Prime Minister, you know the answer to the question of whether or not you told Craig Williams. You cannot prejudice an investigation. You can only prejudice a jury trial. You absolutely can answer this question.
No, it's absolutely not right. Well, there are ongoing independent investigations that those are compromised in any way, shape or form. They
You
are
can't
rightly,
compromise.
They are
You cannot compromise. You cannot compromise.
They are rightly confidential, and it's important that they stay that way, and that's the right thing to do. And you know that. You know that.
You can Prime Minister, you can only prejudice a jury. That is not true. You can only prejudice
we have done
a jury
internal
trial.
inquiries.
You know
of
the
our
answer
own.
to the question whether
we
or
have
not you told Craig Williams.
internal inquiries
Yes or
of
no.
our own, and as a result of those, have suspended candidates.
His problems piling up.
A Prime Minister who just can't catch a break. From the highs of Wednesday night's debate, where his team felt he did well, to today, where there's the news that multiple Tory candidates could be interviewed by Scotland Yard within days. You could hear the frustration in his voice.
Look at that. Brilliant. As clear as anything.
The same craft, but hoping for a different result. The prospect of police investigations into Tory candidates, a campaign gift for Keir Starmer.
I think this latest development highlights, one, how serious this is, two, that the Prime Minister should have acted swiftly at the beginning and shown leadership rather than being bullied into taking action.
His campaign derailed by allegations that top Tories tried to profit from insider knowledge. He only has a week to get back on track. Sam Coates, Sky News, Derbyshire.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, now, shall we? John actually broke this story, the latest twist in the betting scandal. The Prime Minister just can't shake it off.
Well, we've learned today that Liam Booth-Smith, he's the Chief of Staff in Number 10. Used to work with Mr Sunak when he was Chancellor. He was known as the Treasury Travolta in those days because he used to wear leather jackets, apparently. Anyway, he was interviewed by officials from the Gambling Commission last week. So that was after we learned about Craig Williams and almost certainly after we learned about Laura Saunders and also the two officials at Tory HQ, that's Tony Lee and later on we learned about another official, Nick Mason, the head of data. So he's been interviewed not as a suspect at all, as a witness, asked to give his help to officials from the Gambling Commission. Other developments, of course, with the police have now said that there are 7 officers being investigated. We knew about 6 of them, now it's 7. And, of course, they're also investigating the Labour candidate, that's Kevin Craig, no relation. He's the, the candidate in a seat called Central Suffolk and North Ipswich. But clearly, it's all very well for Mr Sunak to say, oh, can't talk about it, it's all confidential, but the Gambling Commission is doing its work and gradually interviewing people. Yesterday, they saw Craig Williams. 2 sessions, a morning and an afternoon session. He's been interviewed as well. So that work is continuing, and there may be more developments from that.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep us right across all of those developments when they happen. John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there. Right, let's bring in our trio for the night, I should say, Salma, Patrick and Adam. Salma, what is going on with the Conservative campaign?
I wish I could tell you, but I think that it boils down to this, is that Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister for 18 months and I think effectively thought that he was just campaigning on that record, but unfortunately has to subsume the entire 14 years of a Conservative administration, even though we've gone through several Prime Ministers and Brexit and a pandemic.
So he has to wear all the mistakes,
He's got to wear it all. But also, even though he's got to wear the mistakes, he could also drive some of the successes or at least remind people that there have been massive economic shocks, which he has tried to calibrate and deal with well. The issue is that if he talks about the pandemic, people bring up Partygate. If he talks about Brexit, you know, there'll be a lot of anti-Brexit people out there that will think about his role in it. So it's not without its pitfalls. And I think, given that, you can see why it's not going as well as it could have.
Patrick, you know, you experienced a Conservative Party in years of opposition, you know, in the wilderness, kind of grappling with itself. Do you think that's where we're kind of heading?
I do. I think that the Conservatives have an existential problem about what they're for and what they represent, and it's going to come out, I think, in full force after the election if they lose. Do they go in the reform direction? Do they try and get close to Nigel Farage's position? Or do they tack more to the centre, where David Cameron was, where they were electorally much more successful, but where the majority of the party isn't in its views? So they're going to have a big question to answer about where they go from here.
Adam, what's your take?
Well, I think the problem that the Conservative campaign has is that even if you take on board everything that's just been said, it's been a dreadful campaign, and that is largely down to Mr Sunak, who, you know, all the mistakes that are made, everyone knows them, the making the declaration in the rain, going to visit the Titanic, and being too slow, frankly, to deal with his own officials on this betting scandal. I mean, someone's done a poll of gaffes of the campaign, and he's got the top 5, you know, so that has not been good. And the thing we have to remember about Rishi Sunak is that he was not the choice of the Conservative Party. He got the job by default. He hasn't had a great deal of loyal support. And, you know, to be honest, the party doesn't seem to want to go behind him. I mean, you know, I was hearing from a senior Conservative advisor who said privately to a Labour person, your man won last night because our man was just shouting at Keir Starmer, whereas Keir Starmer was taking it and looking at the audience. So, you know, that's what they think inside the Conservative Party. So he hasn't brought anything to this campaign, and he's responsible for the timing. And almost the best thing about this campaign is the most irritating for a lot of people, that he's timed it to coincide with the Euros, with Wimbledon, with Glastonbury, which actually means the last week it'll have to be a pretty big gaffe for anyone to notice.
It's true, yeah. It'd be interesting to see what happens with England on Sunday as well. I kind of feel that could really dictate the mood of the nation just 4 days before the election.
Well, it means everyone's going to have a day off canvassing, because knocking on people's doors at 5 o'clock on Sunday would be a very unpopular decision.
Not a good idea. Not a good idea. Or maybe a relief if the last matches have been anything to go by.
Last night, twice the audience for the football that the debate's got, alas.
It's true. Yeah, that was an amazing game. Thank you both very much, all of you, very much indeed for that debate. Well, the betting scandal story that we've just been discussing is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the broadcaster and commentator Alex Andrew and the Whitehall editor of the Daily Mail, that's Claire Ellicott. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. We see them on telly all the time during the election campaigns, but what do party leaders like to watch on their TVs? And we head to the top of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, the latest stop in our Bench Across Britain series. Look at all that effort. Hello, welcome back. Now, with MPs not sitting on those green House of Commons benches, Sky News has been taking one across the country. Now, we've been offering voters a chance to sit and tell us what matters to them in the upcoming election. Well, today, our home editor, Jason Farrell, is in very picturesque Scotland. His journey began in Cornwall, where the bench made its very first stop. He then travelled to a cheese rolling event in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire. Jason gets all the best gigs. A school in North Luton, where he spoke to students who can't vote but will still be affected by the election result. And then it was over to Ealing, Southall in West London, and also Gravesham in Kent to try and speak to some Sikh communities. He then had a trip to the circus in a Conservative stronghold in South Leicestershire, Tatton in Cheshire, where he spoke to some farmers, and then on to the greyhound races in the Labour stronghold of Sheffield Brightside and Hillsborough. Well, now Jason Farrell has taken the bench to Edinburgh.
Wild swimmers in the sculpted gardens of Jupiter Artland near Livingston. A free-spirited, hardy bunch. And the politics among the women we spoke to here leaned towards Scottish independence.
Oh, it's lovely. Oh. I'm just back, like many Scots, from 2 weeks in Germany, watching the football. And what struck me really clearly there was that there are so many small countries in Europe, the same size as Scotland or even smaller, that are doing really well, and Scotland should be running itself.
After independence, there's no need for the Scottish Nationalist Party. It's done its job to get independence, and then we can vote Labour, Liberal, Green, Conservative, any other variety of politicians, because the whole point is for Scotland to be able to manage its own political affairs.
But the director of this outdoor sculpture world thinks only Labour can bring the change she wants to the political landscape.
We've had SNP in Scotland for the last 12 years, and we've had the Tories in Westminster, and I know that the arts are on their knees in a way that they've never been before.
The SNP has been sinking in the polls since the departure of leader Nicola Sturgeon, then Humza Yousaf, following his broken alliance with the Greens. The nationalist dominance in Holyrood is less formidable, and that will be reflected in this election.
There's 57 seats up for grabs in Scotland, and in the last election, Labour got just one of them, the SNP 48. For a long time, the prospect of Labour becoming the largest party in Scotland seemed about as likely as someone hauling this parliamentary bench to the top of Edinburgh's highest hill.
But a more fractured SNP makes their goal of breaking up the union seem more distant, and Labour's ambitions of reconquering Scotland more plausible. Like these Scottish students carrying our bench up Arthur's Seat, or the hikers we met on our trail above Edinburgh, people here have other priorities.
Looking for a party or leader that best represents my views, you know, reducing taxes, especially with the cost of living crisis at the moment, as well as helping, you know, my sort of generation get on the property ladder.
I wouldn't say I'm struggling, but I know a lot of people are, and that is why I tend to vote Labour, because it's not even so much for the position I'm in, but a lot of the population.
You think they help people out more?
Yeah.
With Labour having a real chance of beating the Conservatives, Scots are more likely to vote for them, whether they want an independent Scotland or not.
For the first time in my life, I'm voting for Labour. Just look to your whatever left.
Yeah.
And you can see what's happened in Scotland with not having Labour in power. It's a filthy, filthy weather. Filthy politics.
You're pointing at Holyrood, you're pointing at the Scottish Parliament.
I'm pointing at the Scottish Parliament.
And why? What's filthy about it?
If we were in America, we'd be shouting, "Drain the swamp."
Like Scotland's unpredictable climate, the political weather here seems to be changing. And now anything is possible. Jason Farrell, Sky News, Edinburgh.
What an absolutely beautiful Edinburgh that was. Well, coming up after the Politics Hub at 8 o'clock this evening here on Sky News, Sarah J. Mee will be live from Glasgow for a special edition of the UK Tonight, finding out what matters most to voters there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. They've been all over our screens these past few weeks, like it or not, but what do party leaders like to watch on their TVs?
This exhibition left Ukraine in November of 2022, in the midst of the war, when Kyiv was constantly bombarded. And our idea was to show this art to European public and at the same time to take it out of harm ways. That was a very complicated operation, I have to tell you, because we made a mistake, because we thought that we are very smart. Russians were bombing Kyiv every week on Monday, and we decided that we will go on Tuesday. And of course, that Tuesday was the most intensive bombardment of the whole Ukrainian territory. Fortunately, our trucks left Kyiv before this bombardment started. By the end of the day, they reached Polish border. We were ready to open champagne. And in this moment, some straight rocket exploded at the Polish territory. You remember probably that incident, and everybody decided that it's the beginning of the Third World War. Poles closed the border, and our trucks stayed on the border. So it was unbelievable diplomatic effort. Ukrainian diplomats worked telephones. Fortunately, nobody slept in Poland on that night. And in the morning, Polish authorities just flagged our trucks to Polish territory, and they reached Madrid on time. We started in Madrid, then this exhibition came to Cologne, then to the Royal Museum of Fine Arts in Brussels, then to Vienna. In Vienna, it was enlarged 2 times. Then we divided this exhibition. It's made chronologically, so we created know-how of exhibition which could be, you know, separated or attached together. And one part of it, we opened exhibition last week in the National Gallery of Slovakia, and this week people could see it in London. It's covering the first half of the 20th century, from the beginning to 1930s.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, tomorrow morning, make sure you download the latest episode of Electoral Dysfunction, as there is a very special guest. Here's a quick glimpse at what's in store.
We will, of course, be back on Friday with the final call-up from Jess's sub-bench, and it is a good one.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Honestly, like, I'm going to fangirl. Who is it?
I'm not telling you.
Is it Theresa May? It's not Theresa May.
When I say a special guest...
National treasure. Is it Martha from Baby Reindeer?
Finally. Are you looking forward to the election? Can you win it? Can you win it?
Well, you can download that new episode of Electoral Dysfunction with Beth, Rigby, Baroness Ruth Davidson, and their special guest, Rylan Clark. I have to listen to that one from tomorrow morning, wherever you get your podcasts. Right, now, in the run-up to the election, party leaders have been on our TVs an awful lot. But what are the leaders watching when they're not on the telly themselves? And what do you make of their choices? I just want to run you through what we've discovered about who likes what. So, speaking to the Radio Times, this guy, Rishi Sunak, said he's recently enjoyed watching Bridgerton on Netflix with his wife. He couldn't resist saying that its series showcases why the UK stands out as the creative industry's superpower. I mean, we are in an election campaign after all. Keir Starmer, meanwhile, said he and his family are fans of Channel 4 sitcom Friday Night Dinner. I haven't actually seen that one, so I have to defer to my panel on that. The Lib Dems' Ed Davies said that when he gets a chance to watch TV, it's usually with his kids. He's been watching Horrible Histories. He also told me he's a big fan of the classic kids' TV show, Mr. Tumble. And the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said he recently watched, and I actually cannot believe this, he recently watched apparently Baby Reindeer in one sitting. I don't know if you've seen Baby Reindeer, but I find that quite extraordinary that he managed to sit through the whole lot in one go. And the SNP's John Swinney said that despite Scotland's exit from the tournament, he is going to be keeping a very close eye on the Euros. Right, let's bring in our panel again. It's an election campaign, isn't it, right? So to what extent do you reckon, they're really giving us what they actually watch, or is it kind of spun for the cameras? What do you reckon, Adam?
I actually think most of those sound genuine. I mean, we know in the past it's been highly political. I mean, Tony Blair said his favourite book was Ivanhoe. It just happened to be a BBC drama was running at the time. And My favourite one was Gordon Brown. Mumsnet have this question, what's your favourite biscuit? And Gordon Brown thought it was a political trap and couldn't work out what his favourite biscuit was.
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love it. Didn't he come back afterwards? He didn't answer the question, then he came back and said something like a Garibaldi or something like that.
I don't think he actually, I think he thought, I'm not going to go for this one. Or, of course, Tony Blair's favourite meals varied from Islington News. It was fettuccine with sun-dried tomatoes, and then when he was up north, it was fish and chips.
I love it. I love it. I have to say, I do quite enjoy Rishi Sunak's kind of. I mean, he is quite genuine. Like, he said he liked Ginny Cooper novels as well, right? And then, Bridgerton, I mean, don't hate me, Bridgerton fans, but it's not like the coolest thing to say. No. So, again, it does seem quite, genuine, right?
But that's when the advisors really should step in and say, no, we're gonna give you a different choice.
Time for a focus group.
maybe not Ginny Cooper or Bridgerton.
What really disturbs me about this is that my viewing choices are very similar to Ed Davies. I watch a lot of horrible histories. So that's something new I've learnt this evening about Ed Davies.
I mean, I have to see, I haven't seen the TV, but I love the books.
You didn't have the Green candidates, and they watched all the sort of things I watch.
What do you watch, Adam?
Standard dramas, detective dramas, that kind of thing.
I mean, I watched Baby Reindeer. I don't know if you guys have, but I had to leave it because I found it so intense. I had to leave it, kind of a few days between each episode. So I've just got this vision of, Nigel Farage just kind of staying up all night. There's a lot of it as well. That's 8 or 9 hours.
No, I worked in the Home Office. That was sort of trauma enough. I avoid that when on TV. So I will stick to horrible histories or anything CBeebies. Well, of course, that's only true when we're not watching you on Politics Hub.
Oh, exactly. That's the real answer, isn't it? Watching Politics Hub, of course, on Sky News.
I like the idea of John Swinney watching the Euros until England gets beaten.
The other thing about the Euros is I do feel that it is a bit of a political minefield for politicians as well. I mean, Keir Starmer was like, oh, yeah, I was just on a long day, I just couldn't find an England shirt, I just happened to have a white T-shirt.
I was amazed.
As if it wasn't...
Why did you not ask him whether Gareth Southgate was getting his tactics right? I thought that was the next coming question.
I mean, to be honest, they were kind of trying to wrap me, so otherwise I would have got in there, I think, actually. It is a bit of a minefield, though, isn't it? Who to support in the Euros. You want to support England, but not too much as to alienate anyone else.
Well, imagine how the royal family feels when they've got those divisions that come up between the home countries.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, the other thing is, Sunak can't get anything right, because I thought Bridgerton, fairly sensible suggestion, but a whole load of people piled in saying, he's got young daughters, it's not suitable for them.
I love it. Right, a week to go. We haven't got much time left, but a week to go. Do we know what the conclusion of the election is, Adam?
I think the conclusion is a Labour majority government, but I wouldn't go any further. I think the figures are all over the place.
Interesting stuff. It's been a real pleasure to have you all on the panel tonight. Thank you so much for being here. That is it from us tonight. Big day, our leaders' interview with Sir Keir Starmer. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about the man who is most likely to be our next Prime Minister. I will see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it's Sarah J. Me and the UK Tonight with that special show in Glasgow.